Good morning. Welcome to CHSR 97.9 FM here in New Brunswick, your only alternative radio station. It's Thursday morning. It's a beautiful morning again. It's May the 10th. This is an important day. I want to welcome my co-host, John Heinstein.
Good morning, Tammy.
We have a great show coming up, and I'm going to let John tell you about it.
We are going to broadcast an interview with Jeremy Dutcher. He is the author of Wolastoqiyik Lintuwakanawa, a brilliant album from 2018, which merges Wolastoqey, or Maliseet traditional songs, with classical music and electronica. We talked to him last week. Have a great interview for you. We are going to intersperse some of the songs on his album. Let's start out with one of those songs. It's called Olastek Khan, which is Shaker Lullaby. It is a song for putting babies to sleep. We'd like to welcome Jeremy Dutcher to the program. Jeremy is a classically trained musician from the Tobique First Nation, who this year released a brilliant new album entitled Wolastoqiyik Lintuwakanawa, Our Maliseet Songs. It's based on a collection of wax cylinder recordings made in the early 1900s and housed at the Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec. These are recordings of people from St. Mary's First Nation singing traditional Wolastoqiyik songs. Jeremy's new album blends classical and electronic elements with the old songs with the goal of linguistic reclamation, of revitalizing the language of the Wolastoqey people.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. It's great to have you here. We've been playing your new album steadily since it was released, and we think it's one of the more incredible things that we've heard this year. It's really...
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone that's heard it has said it.
Yeah,
it's one of my top tens.
And you've been practicing your pronunciation as well. Well done.
We've been trying it. We've been playing it every week, so I've been getting better and better. But please,
okay, so good.
Please correct us if we stray from the pronunciation.
Oh, for sure. No, it's a learning process for a lot of people. So I'm happy to be patient with these kind of things. But for me, it was really important to do this first record in the language, you know?
Yes.
And to be sort of unapologetic about singing in Wolastoqey, you know, because I don't know if your listeners know, but Maliseet, or Wolastoqey as we know, is a severely endangered language. There's less than 100 speakers left. So within the next generation, if the young people my age don't to start to consider what it takes to save a language or to pass that on or carry that on, you know, if we don't start doing that work now, we could lose it. You know, it's very real within this generation, the possibility of losing that language. So there's an urgency for me to do this work in the language. So I'm so proud that this first record does that.
It feels like more than music, really. You're tackling history and culture and politics and so many different things. We're playing this on a music show, but could easily be playing at a university or...
Yeah, you know, I wanted this music to live in many different spaces. That was really important for me. So as much as I tried to make it a musically beautiful album, definitely there's things that I wanted to say too. And, you know, there's so many issues that need to be addressed and thought about when it comes to Indigenous issues in this country. And that was just a small part of it. I think being able to speak to many different audiences on many different levels was an important goal for me. And so I'm glad that came through.
How has the reception been to your album?
It's been really warm. I like to think that if you put something out into the world with love, and it will always come back in a good way. That's not necessarily the case, I don't think. But with this one, that definitely did occur. Had a lot of people reaching out from back home and just some really, really beautiful responses to this work. And so I'm excited to come back to the East Coast and share it with the people that this work really is for.
Yes.
I can go around and I can sing this, you know, music anywhere. And it's still fun for me, and I still love to do it, and it connects me back to where I come from. But to actually get to perform it for people that speak the language and that have ancestral connection to this material, as I do, that for me is the most exciting. So, I'll be at the Beaverbrook on May 10th.
Yes, we'll be there.
We will be there.
I can't wait. Good, I'm glad. It'll be a lot of fun.
Will you be playing solo or with a band?
For this one, I'm going to be just at the piano. It's and that's, to be honest, that's how I wrote this music, was just at the piano. So for me, it's a very comfortable place. I'll tell you, I just did a gig a couple weeks ago with RSO, the Regina Symphony Orchestra, and that was my first orchestral gig for this project, and it's a lot different.
Yeah, a lot of elements.
When you're sort of bound to a score, and that was something that I wasn't really used to anymore, because with this material, the creation of it was so improvised, it was so not scored out in like sheet music.
Yeah.
That to have to go back to that was like, oh my God. For this one, it's just going to be a solo piano show, and that allows me to really do whatever I want, you know, because I'm really only beholden to my own musical ideas. Yeah. So it's just going to be a solo piano show, but I think I might have some other musicians come up and share some music from the Maliseet Nation, and maybe some dancers too. I don't know.
Oh, that would be so cool. I'd love to see some dancing.
You know, I basically just want to get all my friends up to come and perform with me. So,
because that seems to be what it's all about, really, is engaging the community in the language.
Absolutely, and I think for me, that's what spurred a lot of this work on, was the realization that the kinds of music that I had made growing up in New Brunswick and around home was very communal based. It's all about collectivity and togetherness, and juxtaposed with the sort of rigid, sort of competitive nature of classical music, which is what I was studying at school. It was like, wow, these are really two different systems, two worldviews, two different ways of making music.
What are those differences between, say, the classical music tradition and the Wolastoqey musical tradition?
For me, they're tapping into a lot of the same stuff. There's a lot of emotion and like heart and grit behind opera music. And the same thing I find in Wolastoq chant is that there's that sense of core and heart in it. Aesthetically, obviously very, very different. Going back and doing the research for this record and listening to all those old archive recordings really gave me a pretty unique insight into not just how music was made today, but also, 110 years ago, and how things have changed and maybe how things haven't changed too much. It was interesting to sort of find a pathway through all of those.
Must have been a surreal experience to listen to those old songs for the first time.
Oh my God. Yeah. I can't even, it's still, I need to be better at describing it because it's a tough one, because it is it was a transformational moment in my life anyway, and set me on a path. But it was a pretty magical moment. I was down in the basement of the Canadian Museum of History in their archives section, which is not the most glamorous place, but I got to listen to these old songs. They had so originally they recorded them on wax cylinders, and then they digitized them to reel-to-reel tapes. And then finally they've put them on to MP3s. So I get to listen to them in the sort of reel-to-reel format, which for me as a 90s kid, I was like, oh, retro, cool.
14, brisé. 14, broken. 15.
So
Are there a
thanks.
lot of songs
Ah.
that you haven't tackled in your
Interview.
album? How many songs
Yeah,
were
for
there?
sure. So there's like the anthropologist. He lived in our community for over 7 years, from 1907 to 1914, and he gathered all of this material. So it wasn't, most interestingly to me as a musician, he collected over 100 songs from the people there. And this wasn't just at St. Mary's too, I should say. This is all up and down the Wolastoq River in the 7 different Wolastoqiyik communities along that river. So he went all up and down this river and collected all these songs and, heard stories and tried to learn our language and all this kind of stuff. So I got to look at all of this material when I went to the museum, and it was really, it was just incredible to be in the presence of all of that knowledge and all that heritage and stuff that is really disconnected from our community today, because it's just sort of sitting on a shelf there. Not a lot of people actually know about the Meshling archive, that's just there waiting to be discovered. And so I guess for me, this whole musical project was about talking about my journey with this archive, but also letting people in my community know, the other young Wolastoqiyik, letting them know that, hey, there's this amazing, wealth of knowledge out there, and all you have to do is go look for it. And here's what I found. And so that was sort of the ethos behind what I was doing. But I mean, hearing those old voices for the first time was like, I'll never forget that experience, because it placed me within a continuum of artistic practice of my people. And when I was able to witness that, I knew there was a responsibility for me to go on and carry that forward and share that with others. So here we are. An album was the best way to do that, I think. But there's many different ways that I'm engaged in the work of cultural revitalization, This album is just one part of that, but I'm also working a lot with our language and our stories as well.
I hear that you're developing a curriculum for the New Brunswick school system.
Well, yeah, no, we were involved with some of the beta testing for the new curriculum coming out of the Department of Education in New Brunswick, which is the first of its kind, which is really, really exciting, because there was no Wolastoqiyik curriculum when I was going to school. And so I'm so happy that we're finally now having this in the schools, and, my niece is now, she's getting pretty good at the language too, through the school system, which is something I never thought I'd see.
So it's making a difference.
Yeah, no, totally. And in Mi'kmaq territory, they now have immersion schools. And, even though we are at a precarious place right now with our language, I think there's a lot that's happening, and we're at a great time of motion and growth. So it's exciting to be a part of that in whatever way.
What led you personally to this point? There must have been something that set you on the trajectory to discovering these songs and forming them in this way.
Well, I always say that this album took 27 years to write.
Yeah.
Just because I guess that's always the case with your first, right? It takes your whole life to sort of gather your experience and gather who you are and your point of view. So it does feel like that I've been working on this forever, but there was a specific instance. Actually, it was while I was still living on the East Coast, and I was sitting with one of my elders from St. Mary's named Maggie Paul.
Yes.
I don't know if you know about Maggie, but
she's in one of your
we
songs,
do.
isn't she?
Yeah, she does make it on the record. Actually, she's on the third track, Ekbahak.
Yes.
And she's talking about the importance of doing this work and what it means to bring these songs back and the potential that has to spur many other things.
I think about that sometimes. I'd like to learn all the songs that the people sang here. I'd like to listen to those and sing those. People will be singing, There's not only me, there's a lot of people bringing the songs back. And when you bring the songs back, you're going to bring the dances back. You're going to bring the people back. You're going to bring everything back.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be just like when we first started. We brought the music back. We brought the drum back. Sweat lodges are here. Teepees are going all over the place. Wigwams, people are making wigwams. Don't you know that?
So you think music had a lot to do with that?
Oh, yeah,
bringing that
you
back?
got that right. Music, yeah, it sure does.
Really?
Music will bring you, because, well, the same way when you sing your song, that feeling that comes in. He's always quiet then. And he said, the ancestors that have went before know the songs. They're listening. And they're so happy because we're singing them again. And he said, and you never asked, what is the song or anything. He said, they gave it to you to sing and you sang it. And he said, you didn't even ask if and much, you just sang. And the ancestors are happy. They're even crying because they're so happy that people are singing the songs again. Because they thought that they'd never hear them again. That's what they thought.
Did you speak Maliseet at this point, Wolastoqey?
Yeah, I think certainly not to the level of fluency that I have today. But, we would do our back and forth in language, and we do greetings in the language, and, she's obviously a fluent speaker, and I'm still a student. But we try. This interview that we did was in English, though. So we were talking, and she said some really beautiful things, but she also, our elders do this, they'll lay a challenge out onto the table for the young people. They understand what the young people are interested in, and then they'll encourage them to go in that way. And so what she had said to me was, and this was her, I guess, way of encouraging me to explore these old songs, was somebody's really got to go in there and dig all that out and bring it back to the people, is what she said. Yeah. And so for me, that was a challenge. I felt I was uniquely positioned, having a music degree and being able to navigate those big institutions. Because I had done university, I was like, oh, what, a museum? That's fine. I can do that.
Those are huge challenges, I'm sure, too.
Oh yeah, no, there was huge challenges, and there's still huge challenges with this work. Even the fact that I got a call from the intellectual property people during this process at the museum to say, hey, we're just checking up on you. What are you doing?
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty unapologetic in the way that I enter into this work, in the way that I believe that this is our material, and I don't have to credit or cite or thank any institution for allowing me to access this work, because it is our material. Yeah.
That's the height of arrogance to claim
Like,
copyright
why should you
over
have
something.
to explain?
I wish everyone was on that page with us, but unfortunately, it still does need a lot of explaining. And I think institutions and museums particularly are invested in keeping the narrative alive that keeps them in business.
There's always been like a tenuous relationship between anthropologists and native people.
Oh, for sure. No, when I told my mother because I was doing a music degree in Halifax, and at the end of my degree, I switched into anthropology to start working on this project, to start doing the research. And I told my mother, and she said, "Oh, what? An anthropology? What the? What are you doing, boy?" I think there's a sense that we've been studied to death.
Yeah. Studied and then hidden or put on display.
Yeah. Well, exactly, too. That's it. But I think, too, when our people take the reins back and we are in charge of the research methods and we're conducting our research in our own ways, that's actually transformative. And I feel like that is something that can really change things.
You seem to be doing that with the cover of your album.
Yeah. That cover, I guess, was, I love that so much. I got to collaborate with one of my favorite artists here in Toronto named Kent Milkman. Mm-hmm. And he's an incredible Cree visual artist. And he painted that backdrop.
Wow.
that you see in that. And then and that photo is actually a recreation of an old photo from the early 1900s, around when these recordings were taken. In the original photo, there's this big chief in a headdress sitting in the chair that I'm seated in, and then there's an anthropologist in the other chair sort of doing the song collecting. And that photo always kind of really haunted me, when I was in school and stuff, because I thought, where do I sit as an Indigenous researcher and musician and performer? Mm-hmm. I'm kind of both, I guess. I'm both subject and object at the same time. So how do I represent that in my art? And Kent offered his services, and I just jumped on the chance. I think it's a stunning photo,
it's
and
amazing.
I'm so happy that it worked out.
And I noticed that you took the anthropologist out of the photo, so it's really, it becomes a critique of the whole anthropological process. That you're turning the eye back on Western culture.
There's a saying that sort of talking about the anthropological project. This whole time you might have been watching us, but don't forget that we were also watching you, and we were making notes too. So it's not always such a one-way street.
So the suit that you're wearing in
I
that
was just gonna
album
ask
cover,
about
that was
that.
done by a local designer, was it not?
Yeah, it sure was. She is actually she's living in Eel River Bar, but she comes from Tobic. So I know her family quite well, and Stephanie Lebilois was the one that created this traditional coat, and we wanted something that was referencing traditional design, and you can see like on the lapel there's double curves, which is very emblematic of our traditional design aesthetic in the East Coast, but also give it a really like modern and like chic flair as well. And so that's actually, the black material is actually like a denim, believe it or not, and it's so it's designed to be worn on stage.
You'll be wearing that?
I haven't quite decided yet. I wore it last time I was back. I was played at the Playhouse for the New Constellations tour in December, and I wore that coat then. I never can decide if I'm going to wear it or not. I think my mother would really like it. But it's also, it's not the easiest to transport. And anyway, I also have to replace a button on it and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, we'll see if I get to it. But I love, like, that, wearing that jacket makes me feel like a superhero, like a Maliseet superhero.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I always love to crack that out. And to support local artists and designers, I think is really, really important too. You know, rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, all of those things connect, don't they?
Totally.
It's that,
Totally.
you know, you reach that critical juncture where everything just starts moving forward.
Whew, ready or not.
So you're putting out a vinyl version of this, aren't you? Where we'll get to see, you know, in a larger size that album cover.
Let me tell you, I just listened to the first test press. Yesterday, and oh my God. I was a bit of a doubter about vinyl, and it sounds so much better, and all these pretentious people talking about vinyl. And then I put it on, and I was like, holy shit!
Yeah, it's mastered differently than digital
It's
stuff.
a totally different album.
Yeah.
Honestly, there's so many things that I'm hearing that I forgot about in the recording process. I was like, oh yeah, we did that. Cool. Anyway, so it's just like, and I think it also pitches everything up like a semitone, and so it's even like, it sounds a little brighter. It's just like a little nicer. I don't know. I really love it.
Interesting.
And also, I can press the speed up button, and it turns all my songs into like party tracks.
I love that. I'm going to try
Which
that.
I'm
I'm
really
getting the
excited
album, and I'm going to try
Okay,
that.
Fantastic. You have to try that. I would specifically ask you to try that on the second track called Aswaniga. In
Okay.
the middle section, there's like a little.
I love that track. I played that track yesterday on my show, and I
no way.
love,
Cool.
love,
Okay.
love it.
12, 12.
So, who were some of your big classical influences?
Classical music is something I came to pretty actually late in life compared to most. And, you know, I know Fredericton has a pretty good emerging classical music infrastructure, but I really wasn't a part of that at all growing up. It wasn't actually until I moved to Halifax and started my music degree that I really got thrown into to everything that classical music was. But of course, you know, growing up in Fredericton in the shadow of the great Misha Bruegger-Gossman as a singer, you know, and she's somebody that I've come to know now, and we've done some festivals together, and is somebody that I look up to a lot as a singer and performer and a hometown girl. But in terms of composers, you know, I love the French Impressionists, and there's so much beautiful piano music coming out of that time, the sort of turn of the century, and the French guys, the Russians, you know, Shostakovich, and I'm just a lover of sound, I guess. And I think for me that comes in so many forms, and classical music is one way to express that, and maybe the most grandiose way to express that too. But I don't know, I've been inspired by so many different genres and different ways of music making on this record. So
yeah, there's a lot of electronica in there. I noticed one of the later tracks has electronic drums that kind of serve as a different version of traditional drums.
A sign of things to come, maybe. I worked with a friend and dear producer, or sorry, a producer and dear friend, not dear producer, in Montreal, and his name is Buffalo. I really wanted to have these be accessible pieces, you know, and people actually, the point was that they want to listen to them. You know, I very easily could have written atonal compositions based on these old archive songs. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was, what's the point of that? You know, I'm kind of just doing that for me. So let's create something that people are going to want to pick up and listen to. And so for me, yeah, linking up with somebody who could bring the electronic element.
Even there's this jazz element.
Jazz elements too, you know, and that comes from my musical upbringing too. And my brother is a jazz player in town, actually, John Dutcher, and I learned a lot from him too.
He plays with Sugar Bomb.
He does play with Sugar Bomb, yeah. One of
great
my
player.
Fans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, he's a great player, and I love to play with Sugar Bomb too. I've gotten up and sung with a few songs with them. So come check them out sometime. I might be there.
Oh, that would be great.
Absolutely.
I'm curious about some of the musical aspects of traditional Wolastoqey music. Mm-hmm. Do they use the same basic scale? Was there like a real translation process in bringing music from another culture into more of a classical music tradition?
Sure. So I think, translation is the exact word that I would probably use too, because I think there's, in so many ways, these musical worlds didn't fit together. Whether that's thinking about like even just something as simple as tonality. I always say that like anyone with perfect pitch should just not listen to my record because it's just not gonna be an enjoyable experience for you.
Pitch is a Western concept, isn't it?
Well, for sure, but I definitely, conceptual or not, I definitely have some friends who are fortunate enough to have this gift. But it also makes it very, very hard to listen to things that are even slightly out. And so on some tracks on this record, I sing with the archive, mm-hmm. And he's singing maybe about half a semitone under sort of tempered tuning on a piano. So I have to sing somewhere between what the strings are playing, which is perfectly on tune, and then somewhere between that I need to be placed, and then the archival voice is going to be under what we would think of as in tune, quote unquote. So I guess for me it was finding that middle path and finding ways to make unjust tuning make it just. So I think for me, it was about finding ways to highlight these songs and use the tonal language that I had learned through study in school and looking at classical music. Undeniably, I write most of my pieces at the piano, and so I'm limited to the 88 keys that I'm given in that way. But and this is for this project too. I think, going forward, I've started to interrogate my own artistic practice and find ways to invest in other ways of creating. So ones that are not just about sitting at a piano and writing. Because, why was that my assumption that is how you write an album? Why was that the way that it ought to be done? Are there better ways? Are there ways that I can go write music by being on the land or by having a relationship to the land? There's a singer here in Toronto named Cheryl Arondel. She does some pretty incredible work. She's Cree from the west part of the country, but she does some pretty incredible work around singing to the land. And that's the idea that embedded within the land, within the fields, within the water, there are songs, and we just need to echo them back. So, there's so many ways to create sound and to come to what we know of as a record or an album.
Really?
This one, it was research-based, and it was compositional, and it was a lot of different things. But I think what came out was a middle space, at least I hope, a middle space between these worlds.
Feels like a new form of music.
Well, and that seems like a thank you, by the way, for saying that. I don't feel like I can say that. That doesn't feel like...
Oh, it does. In the same sense that American jazz was a fusion of different cultures.
Right.
Is that a fair comparison, do you think?
I think so. Not a comparison I would make, just because I don't know that would be kosher. But yeah, no, I think, when we take two very distinct genre or aesthetic and turn them in on each other and let them speak to each other, new conversations are going to come out no matter what. It's what it is. Like, when you bring these two things together, inevitably you're going to have new ways of speaking or new ways of thinking. So I guess for me, it was just about trying to represent that reality. And really that reality that I have lived for 27 years, being at the intersection of Indigenous and non-Indigenous ways of knowing. I grew up very much between communities, was raised in Fredericton, but also would be going back and forth all the time to Tobic as well. And so I guess the music is really just a reflection of my own identity, I guess, and how I've come to fit within the landscape of the Wolastoqiyik people,
Because your album doesn't feel like it's trying to resurrect the past in the way that the past was. It feels like that you're creating a new present and a new future with it.
I agree with that 100%.
We can't go back,
Nope.
No.
You can't go back.
It's never going to be how it was, but we can create a new way. And we're part of that in this generation, I think, of creating a new way and a better way, I think. Where we can actually learn from each other's gifts. There's this prophecy in our worldview that says, in this time, we're all the peoples of the world, we're going to come together. And we're going to take the gifts that we all have to offer. Each peoples on this world have a gift to offer. And if we can sit down together and listen to those gifts and lift each other up through that, for me, that is our future. That is how we come together. And that's how we actually solve the problems facing our world. So, yeah, I think for me, musically, it was about capturing and respecting the dignity of those old songs and trying to bring them forward. And it was all about that, too, but definitely about saying something new as well and carving out a new path, I guess, that isn't held down by grief or trauma or history, but can actually be generative in its discussions and think about futurism and think about where we're actually going.
Very positive.
It's beautifully said.
Very, very positive. We need that right now.
Positivity. Yeah, I think so too. I think certainly there's enough to be mad about. And I have my moments where there's certainly moments on the record where I expel my rage for everything that has gone on in this country and for things that are just now coming out. People are just starting now to talk about. But also, yeah, underlying that, I think, is my personal ethos in that I feel like you can accomplish so much with beauty and with honest conversations and with gentle hearts than you can with shouting and with name calling and all this stuff, So I invest in that. That's the kind of path I want to take. And hopefully folks will come along for the ride.
I'm on.
Me too.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll see you on May 10th.
Oh, Jeremy,
yes,
thank you
we'll be
so much. That was
pleasure.
just
That was
completely
fantastic to talk.
enlightening.
And all the best.
Yeah.
Thank you.
From Jeremy Dutcher. amazing. I hope to see you all out tonight at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. Show starts at 7 o'clock. It's pay what you can. It's going to be amazing. And I hope to see a lot of you there. And I want to thank you so much for listening to our show today on CHSR 97.9. And I want to thank John Heinstein. He produced this entire show. So we're going to leave you with one last track. Have a great Thursday. See you tonight.